work in progress, and I want to commend the people that have been working on this for so many months. They have done such great work, and it's finally come to fruition here, and so it's just with great pleasure that I am able to share the efforts of this work that we have been participating in. So tonight what I'd like to do is share with you an overview of our 3-year strategic finance plan, the process that we actually went through to create the plan, what our instructional priorities are, and how we want to invest in those instructional priorities. We'll talk a little bit about our baseline financial picture for Lake County Schools now and for 3 years in the future. And then we'll talk about the budget realignment piece for that. So, and as with anything else, any initiative that we do, it's very important that we're able to track our progress, and there's an accountability nature. And so we'll talk about that as we go along. So first of all, let's start with what is a strategic finance plan. Basically, a strategic finance plan is a document that will outline our strategy with regards to funding initiatives and budget realignment for the next 3 years. It is a little different than what we've done in the past because it is directly linked to the district's priorities, and it's funding those priorities above and beyond the current funding in particular areas. It also will describe the specific strategies and actions that we're going to take to get to that funding opportunity. The strategic finance plan is not the annual budget, but it goes in conjunction with the annual budget. And so when you look at the strategic finance plan, it is kind of the roadmap, if you will, that identifies where we want to go, and the annual budget will inform the strategic finance plan year to year as they put the budget numbers to it. So how does it differ from what we've traditionally done? On the left side of the screen, you will see the traditional approach. On the right side, you'll see the strategic finance plan approach. And this is how they differ. In the past, the annual budget was an activity that we did. We got the budgetary numbers, we looked at the past year, and we tended to develop our budget in much the same fashion. And there really wasn't a direct link between district-specific priorities and the spending. The strategic finance plan, in contrast, is very much focused on the strategic plan and very specific priorities that the district is wanting to invest in that have a direct touch on student achievement. And we know that very specifically going in. The traditional approach has been siloed, and it's been mainly the finance department and the leadership team and the board puts the budget together. It comes through the cycle and have public hearings. This time, the strategic finance plan starts much earlier and has a very rich engagement and contribution from a broad set of stakeholders. We know that the priorities need to be a 3-year planning horizon, and it allows us now to look 3 years into the future and develop our financial plan from that point forward. The process that we've used and developed is located on the left, and you'll see in this graphic organizer the actual process that we've just gone through to develop the strategic finance plan. It is the process that we will continue to use year after year. And if you look at the top, we start with determining, confirming, updating our instructional priorities. Then we want to project 3-year revenues and expenditures. We want to evaluate the realignment opportunities to see, are they feasible? Do they match? Do they touch students? Are they aligned with what our priorities are? And then we will create that strategic finance plan. It will be a rolling plan, so that right now what you're seeing tonight is our 3-year plan. But after next year, when we're back here at the table this time next year, we'll be looking at the 15-16 and a 3-year phase from there. So as 1 year has passed off the strategic finance plan, we'll add a year on to the other end of it. It's important to note that with a rolling process and you're projecting that you are giving estimates. And the estimates are pretty close to the mark the first year, but as you get to the 2nd and 3rd year out, they are indeed estimates. And when revenues change along the way, then we have to go in and make some changes along the way with that. So that's a brief overview of the strategic finance plan. Now, how do we create this strategic finance plan. What was the process? You may have been on MindMixer and some of our websites and you would see this timeline. And this is just to review the timeline that we started this process in July. And as we've gone along, we did a deep analysis of our current allocations and expenditures. We looked at that, we firmed up our priorities, and now we wanted to actually look at how we measure an academic return on investment. And we have a review and reflection piece in that. And so we've just been through this cycle. And so once we have implemented this strategic finance plan here for the 14-15 school year, we'll actually review the process, tweak it, and then come back to the beginning of this timeline and start the process again. We've had two-way communication throughout the process. We've analyzed and shared information, and you can see the timeline of doing that. We've gathered input and ideas so that we could solicit information from all our stakeholder groups along the way with town hall meetings. We then created our strategic finance plan based on a lot of the input that we received along the way and from the data analysis that we created. So let's get into the plan now. And we're going to start by looking at our investment side of the house and our instructional priorities. So when we do this, when we actually went through and looked at our expenditures, we learned some things in this process. First of all, we learned that during our resource review of our expenditures, we found that less than 28% of our ELL students, which is a very strong growing population in our district, only less than 28% scored satisfactory or above in reading on the 2013 MCAT, as compared to 46% across all other student populations. So in essence, we have a very large academic achievement gap there. And we also found that Lake County Schools spend 70% less in additional funding. So we have that baseline funding, but then additional funding that goes into our ELL population for struggling students. We found that we spent 70% less than comparable districts in our resource review. In the area of struggling students, these are students that score level 1 and level 2 and are less than proficient. We found that resources were very limited for differentiating instruction for students who are less than proficient. We found that things were divided up equally across all our schools and our student population, when in essence our student population is no longer the same. And differentiating that population and the resources is important. We also find that despite ESE and Title funding, many schools still lack adequate resources to support level 1s and 2s. We know that our Title I dollars go to Title I schools for the very purpose of supporting struggling students. We know that IDEA funding goes to help students that are struggling that are ESE. But we also found that we did not provide enough funding, additional funding, to support the students that are not in those other areas, but still were scoring less than proficient. So we want to make sure that we have addressed this critical need. So in addition to our 4 original instructional priorities that we had posed at the beginning of this process, we believe that it is critical that we try and close the achievement gap of English language learners and other identified struggling students groups. So we're going to use our new program evaluation and innovation process to determine how we can use additional funding to adequately touch and impact student achievement with these groups. So here's now what our instructional priorities look like. We have added those 2 instructional priorities on the left. We believe these are immediate investment needs for struggling students, both ELL and students that are less than proficient. And then on the right, you're going to see the system and capacity building instructional priorities that are fundamental needs for our district to build, to touch student achievement and move our district forward. And so you will see the 4 of them there. And they have been refined to be very specific about what they are going to accomplish. The talent development pipeline, teacher and principal induction and development, program evaluation and innovation, and personalized learning. So let's talk a little bit about what these mean and how we're proposing to fund them. The first one is English language learners, and this is the initiative overview. You'll notice this template, and this is a type of context that we try to put the information in so that you as our community can see why this is an important priority, what we plan to do with it, what it's going to cost, and how we're going to measure that investment. So in the case of English language learners on this slide, you're going to see that this initiative, we believe, will add to existing funding levels to increase achievement for this growing student population. And so we want to invest $1 million each of the 3 years for a total of $3 million into this population to help the struggling ELL students. On the right, you're going to see some metrics, and we've started to identify these. You're going to see, too, that the average ELL FCAT reading achievement score should increase as a result of this intervention, as well as ELL FCAT math scores. There are some other additional metrics that will be added to this, but because this particular initiative is going to go through our program evaluation and innovation process to thoroughly vet that anything that we use to spend this money on will be very research-based and have certain criteria to touch and impact student achievement. Those are still being determined. And just like this particular page, we have a page for struggling students. It's school initiative overview. We will do the exact same thing with this particular priority and critical need, that we're proposing that we invest $1 million each year for 3 years for a total of $3 million to address students that are struggling, that are scoring less than proficient. The talent development pipeline overview, we believe that we need to reward the most effective teachers and increase effectiveness since they are directly in front of students and have such a strong impact on student achievement as well as the leaders of the school. In this particular chart, you're going to see that in this arena, we are proposing in 2014-15, you will see the spend there of the $1.4 million. This is to develop compensation and that's linked to evaluation and directly linked to student achievement. You will see how it ramps up in the 2016 and 2017 over the 3 years. You will also see on this particular slide at the right the various metrics we will use to measure the academic return on this investment. In the costs on this one, you will see if you read the chart, the dark blue represents the stipends and bonuses for the performance pay piece. The lighter blue is any personnel staff. And in these particular charts, what we try to do is capture the full cost of the investment in this initiative. So, which is something we have not done before. The next initiative is teacher induction and coaching. This is where we're looking at teachers and leaders that are new to their position in their first 2 years of teaching, that we have a pure coaching model that will help increase a teacher's effectiveness to a high-performing teacher in a quicker turnaround time with that increased coaching. And you will see the cost of this investment is pretty consistent across the 3 years. You will notice that this one has a little higher investment in personnel as opposed to non-personnel items. The reason for this is a coaching model, so you're looking at having a coach ratio for those teachers in the classroom. Again, this particular area has metrics. You can see a draft of some of them, and this one is still in work in progress. Principal induction and development is the same. We do have principals that walk into their positions that are brand new principals because of the strength of the leadership and the impact on student achievement. We believe that principal induction and coaching is equally as important. We also know that this is an area that we have had, we have not had a very formal program in, and it is important that we do that as the role of the administrator and principal is changing. with the instructional emphasis that is there. And you'll see the metrics that are there. Program evaluation and innovation. In this particular area, we are actually looking to institute tools and processes to approach a formal process to look at a way to evaluate existing programs and a way to cost out and size new innovations that are coming out and looking to be innovative. It's important that anything that new is added, that it fits our system, it touches students, it supports our high priorities and the strategic plan of the district, and that we are looking at that investment by capturing the cost estimates before we actually push the start button. Again, you will see the cost of this is in non-personnel and personnel, because this is an area that we have not done before. And most businesses and corporations have an area just like this. And this is one that is a work in progress. Personalized learning for teachers and leaders. Again, this is in the area of professional development. We're looking to make sure that teachers can develop faster and in a more targeted manner that is individualized, and that we are using those resources, and you will see the target measures there for that. We have a similar plan for personalized learning for students. Now on this particular one, you're going to see that the costs are different as we start out with a ramp up. So in 2014-15, you're going to see that we're just getting started with this, and then it will be ramping up in a very significant way in the years to come in the last 2 years of this 3-year strategic plan. This is as we are in a planning phase of this. We have also been tapping into grant opportunities for personalized learning for students. So those are coming together, and we're continuing to work on this particular one. So when you bring all these investments together, here's a summary page of what these investments look like. And you will see the ones that we just talked about on the left side, and then you'll see the investment in monies that are there for each one of them year by year. So if you look at this chart, you're going to see in 2014-2015 that if we invested all things on the previous slides that we talked about, it totals a $5.5 million investment in these specific areas. In the 2015-16 school year, you will see that it calculates to a $7.2 million investment, and likewise in 2016-17, an $8.4 million investment as we ramp up and bring these programs to a strong fidelity implementation. So those are investments, but before we can invest in anything, we need to take a look at our baseline financial picture. And so at this point in time, I want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about what we learned about where we are and what our estimated outlook looks like for Lake County schools with regards to revenues and expenditures. So as we're creating our first strategic finance plan, we learned that our budget is a exceptionally lean, meager budget. We know that Florida is one of the lowest funded states in the United States, and we know that Lake County is 65th out of 67. So we learned what an exceptionally lean budget we have. We also learned that our school district has been very good at prioritizing and protecting mandatory costs. We allocate our resources evenly across the district, and while that has functioned very well over the years for us, we also learned that our population is very differentiated, and that even distribution is not working at this point in time. We also learned that we spend a lower percentage of resources on direct instruction than we really had anticipated or believed we should. So what can we do? We can increase the focus on our educational priorities rather than just simply looking at a bottom line financial page. And that we are very strategic about how we invest and where we align our dollars. We need to focus on that academic return on that investment. We need to differentiate the allocation of resources so that we are funding areas that have the greatest impact on student achievement. And we also need to be very thoughtful about the various funding sources we have with Title one IDA in our capital budget so that we're using all our budgets very efficiently and effectively. So here's the 3-year projected outlook of our district. What we did here is we looked at if we were to continue to operate and budget exactly like we've done this year, making no new specific investments, investing in nothing that we just talked about, and we spent money in exactly the same way that we did this past year, we know going into 2014-15 that we are looking at a $3.8 million estimated funding gap. We know, estimating that in 2016, that on the same baseline of assumptions that we're looking at a gap of about $7.1 million. And likewise in 2017, a $10.4 million gap. That's assuming that we did nothing different. So the bottom line is what that is saying is that expenditures are going up because the costs change, but our revenues are very flat. So if you take this into consideration, just so you understand how we came up with those estimates, some key revenue assumptions are that our overall projections were based on a historic year-to-year change in funding level. So we looked at that historical data. We also considered the fact that our entitlements, all our title programs, that funding is now flat due to sequestration. We also looked at our past trend, and we're anticipating that the 1.5% increase in per FTE state funding, we anticipate that will continue. And based on enrollment projections, we based our assumptions on an annual increase of 500 students in the district. In the same area of expenses, our overall projections were based on historical year-to-year changes in expenditures, that there is an available pool for staff compensation increases of 2.5% annually. That's to cover those recurring costs. And that our maintenance of reserves, which is calculated at 4%, that we will continue to make sure that that is maintained at all times. So those were the assumptions we based those projections on. So if you bring the two together and you intersect, here are the instructional priority investments that we want to make, and you'll notice that those are the lighter blue. And at the bottom is the gap in our revenues and our expenditures, which we know we have to address. So at a baseline, that's why those are on the bottom, because those are have-tos. The instructional priorities we also believe are have-tos because they are certain needs that we know will impact student achievement. So when you really look at it and you combine the two together, if you look at 2015, $3.8 million is the gap, 5.5 is the investment in the instructional priorities. So basically we are looking at building a finance plan that reallocates or redeploys $9.3 million. Likewise, 14.3 in the second year and 18.8 in the third year. So how are we going to do this? That's the million-dollar question. So what we did in this project with a realignment, we actually looked at the opportunities that were submitted to us through all the town hall meetings, the committee meetings, advisory groups, mind mixer, all the ideas that came. We looked at every one of those and we put them in context in two ways. We looked at them from a qualitative impact and a quantitative impact. And the teams looked at qualitative to say, what's the proximity of that to students? How does it touch students? How does it help students? How does it detract from student achievement? Is it feasible? And does it coincide with our instructional priorities? And then we looked at the quantitative, the budget numbers. So here are the results of that review. So here are some of the realignment opportunities that were suggested and the actual sizing as far as the feasibility of them. The first one is capital expenditure realignment. We realized in this whole process that our operating budget spent an inordinate amount of money in some areas that there are other budgets that are scheduled to address those areas. And we were higher in the operations side. And that was due to the fact that operating budget was used for capital budget expenditures. And so in this particular area, since property values seem to be turning around and increasing, we expect that there will be an increase in these dollars next year, that it's important that we make sure that capital expenditures are in line with the capital budget of which they are to be funded from. And so we believe that by shifting those dollars under that fund, that will free up operational dollars to go and be put back into the classroom. Continuing down the left side of the page, consolidated purchasing. We believe that through an economy of scale, that if we consolidated purchasing of things that were purchased across the district, and this was one area where we needed to move away from site-based management to get that economy of scale. And we have done this in certain instances, and it has proven to be very successful. On the right side, high school schedule. We've had the luxury of having a 4x4 schedule in our high schools over many years. We are also seeing the impact on this not only financially but academically with the changes in some of the testing and all of that, that we need to make sure that we're doing it for the academic sound reasons and also from a financial standpoint. So this recommendation is to move all high schools from a block schedule to a variation of the 7-period day. And IDEA funding, we also know that through the IDEA funding that there is a reserve amount that is set aside for the uniquenesses of IDEA and this particular student population. We believe the percentage of that is on the high side, and that there are dollars that can be freed up to be redeployed into some academic areas that help support struggling students in the IDEA area. We do recognize that this is non-recurring dollars, and it is a one-time investment for the 3 years of this strategic plan, but it will not be there after this cycle of the strategic plan. Some additional ideas: maintenance lawn care. Some of the ideas came, and as all school districts go through, sometimes they talk about outsourcing. Is outsourcing more cost efficient than not? We don't believe that outsourcing is more cost efficient. And through this process, what we believe is that if we look at internally the way we do our custodial arena and look at specializing, that we can create lawn care teams to look at geographic locations, and that's their specialty and that's what they do. How this was a cost savings: one, you're streamlining your resources with your employees, but you are also saving capital investments into lawn care equipment. Because right now each school site, each department site has to have their own lawnmower or lawn tractor and all the equipment, and it's very costly to keep those up to date and replacement. And we believe that by specializing in this area, that we can streamline and have some ongoing savings here. Moving down the left side, a transportation bell schedule and software. This has been talked about with our school board before, and this is about doing a 2-tier transportation system as opposed to a 3-tiered transportation system. That does mean that there would be some routes combined at the secondary levels. We are proposing that we take next year to thoroughly vet this for a variety of reasons. One, we're just implementing a new routing software, and that we needed to get the cost savings from the routing software, and then we needed to do the simulated models, have the town hall meetings, have parents have an opportunity to see what simulated bell schedules look like, what transportation. This is an impact across our district, and so we believe that we need to take next year to do that. On the right side, management discretion. This is an area where, as a district office, we will continue to streamline. We're implementing a new system, and that is very technological, and we believe that we can still tweak and get some efficiencies along the way. Administrative salaries. Our administrators are moving to a performance-based pay system that will be fully functional in 2016. It is in design phase right now. It will be sent to the Department of Education this spring for approval. They will operate on that next year. So at this point in time, district and school administrators would be excluded from any salary increases until that new model is put in place. Some additional realignment opportunities include transportation for athletics. I want to be very clear and very specific on this one. This is not reducing athletic opportunities for students. This is looking at the amount of funding that goes into transportation costs for athletic programs. What we found in this particular item is that in looking at the data from surrounding school districts in Florida, we found that Lake County used a much larger funding ratio out of the Fund 100 for transportation costs than other districts surrounding us. And so we believe that there is an efficiency there, that if we look at our scheduling patterns with activities and the distances, that we can reduce and consolidate that by 25%. So again, this is not reducing any athletic sports opportunities. Moving across, transportation busing surcharge, we were given a suggestion to charge students to ride. We cannot charge students who are eligible under statute for transportation, but the school board has already instituted a fee-based transportation for students who are ineligible because they live within the 2-mile zone, and so we're simply picking that particular practice that the school board has already implemented here. Transportation white fleet, we believe that in this particular instance where we have our white fleet, these are the maintenance vehicles, those kinds of cars, non-bus transportation, that we can use a multiple number of repair services and do that through an outsourcing model as opposed to in-house. Down at the bottom, you're going to see clerical and guidance counselors. And if you'll remember from the very first review of the data, we were higher in allocations in the areas of clerical and guidance counselors than the median of the comparable districts that we were compared to in the study. We believe that that needs further investigation, and that we want to look at job tasks that our folks who are in these positions are assigned to do, and really do a much deeper review than just allocations. And so our recommendation here is that we look at this next year, take no action on it, but put it under further study. But we also believe that there is some efficiency that can be gained in those areas by streamlining and really focusing how we do those particular arenas. So those are the realignment opportunities that have feasibility by looking at them through that quantitative and qualitative review. So at this point in time, here's a summary of what we just talked about with realignment opportunities and what the projected savings would be for each of those, year 1, year 2, and year 3. So I'll give you just a minute to look at those. To the next slide now. In addition, we realize there are some areas, and they're both represented on this particular slide, in professional development and personalized learning for students, where we have budgets already set up for these that we're not talking about necessarily adding in addition to, but repurposing the budgets that we already have set aside. In these particular instances, you will see these highlighted in future pages as self-funded. So you'll see a category called self-funding underneath it. And what that means is that there's a budget already. We're talking about looking at what we're already doing there and stop doing some things that aren't working to free up that money to reinvest in some of the areas that we've highlighted here that fall in those divisions. So here's the summary page, and this is kind of the page that tells the whole story. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the realignment opportunities. Those are the areas that we can streamline and save money or free money to be redeployed, to be invested on the right side in the investment opportunities. So if you read down through this chart, you'll see the areas we talked about. You'll see in 2014, 2015, all the amounts that we had on those previous slides, and those total up to $10.1 million. So if we were to do all the things that we talked about, and we freed up that money in the first year, we would reinvest it in the first year on the right side. You can see down at the bottom, knowing that we have a funding gap already that we have to address, that we will have a net surplus of $1.4 million. That means we're in the green. That 1.4 then goes to the top of the 2015-16 year and can be reinvested and redeployed in those areas. But on the left-hand side, you can see that we're continuing to ramp up and redefine and refine those areas. So the second year, you're going to see a $3.3 million redeployment opportunity, and that's factored in. At the end of the day, on the right side, the net surplus is $1 million that goes up to the top and can be redeployed the third year. We continue with our realignment opportunities, and in that particular area, that totals $16.9 million, and that's where you balance out. Now, the one thing I have to draw your attention to is that in the third year, while it's balanced here because it's all accounted for, we really haven't balanced because there is a $3.5 million line item that says other TBD, other to be determined ideas on the left-hand side, because that's where we still have to go deeper than the ideas that are on this page that we've just talked about. So we've balanced until that third year. Now the interesting thing is that we would have that $3.5 million gap even if we didn't invest in anything because of the differences of the funding gaps that I highlighted a few minutes ago. So just food for thought as we're walking down this journey together and we put the strategic finance plan into play. When we get to year 2, we need to start thinking about how we're going to look at meeting that gap of that $3.5 million. So some of the other ideas that were suggested on MindMixer and the advisory groups and all the stakeholder feedback we got, some of the ones that are yet to be sized and further researched are additional clerical savings or changes in year 3. We don't know where that will be yet. Looking at the guidance counselor changes and looking at the assessment of their roles, remember we said we were going to hold on that. Middle school schedule redesign, looking at the scheduling for middle school. Is there a potential to streamline that? Look at additional reimbursements for ESE and through the Medicaid program. Look at some additional savings through our new ERP system. Looking at magnet school concepts. And then there may be some other opportunities that we identify over the next 2 years. So here's just the executive summary of what I just talked about here. And these 2 pages basically just highlight in summary the areas of our instructional priorities, that the long-term priorities are the 4 instructional priorities, and then the 2 critical immediate needs with ELL and struggling students. We still need to close a budget gap, even if we did nothing. And we want to make sure that we have ongoing conversation as we go through this. The second page of the summary just summarizes what we just talked about, the areas that we have, that we can have redeployment opportunities here. So the last phase is how do we track our progress? Because it's very important if we're going to make significant changes that we are able to measure that. And that is part of this initiative that we have to report on, but we believe that there are other metrics. And so you're going to see the 3 circles here, and they represent the 3 categories of what we need to track. We need to track our effectiveness in the use of resources. Did we use them effectively in funding our instructional priorities? The process that we used, did the process work? And then the outer area is, have we changed our culture to be one of a strategic finance planning culture? It's important that we move from, here's a budget event, we do it, here's the numbers, balance it, and we just start cutting and that type of thing with no strategic connection to student achievement. So it's very important that we move from that type of a culture to one of a very strategic thinking, strategic decision-making that is based on return on investment. So here are the metrics for those 3 areas. Many of these we have because they were established as mile markers with our Spend Money Smartly EngageLCS project. But we also believe that these are very important and fundamental as we put this process in place for Lake County schools from now and in the future. So you can see a little bit about the resources there. So at that point in time, that concludes the formal presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the strategic finance plan.
I have a couple.
Okay.
Writing them down. You mentioned that you're going to start cutting things that aren't working. Have you touched on anything that actually you found that isn't working, that you're already ready to do that, or that's part of the process?
That's part of the process.
That's part of the
That program evaluation and innovation process, that is actually going to do just that we will run programs through that process. So that process is being developed right now, and we'll actually have someone that owns that. And so we will identify, here are 2 or 3
Everything
programs,
is
and run it through.
It's out of the chopping block, so to speak. I mean, any program that we have.
Well, we think it needs to be reviewed for
Yeah,
effectiveness.
right.
I can't say that just because it gets reviewed, it's on the chopping block.
Right.
Yeah.
But everything is up for.
Everything needs to
Yeah.
be reviewed
Needs to
and
be
have
reviewed.
some kind of evaluation so that we know that it's working.
Gotcha. And I think I'm kind of like, I'm that person that needs that help because I'm an ESE teacher in elementary school in a co-teaching situation at Pine Ridge. And the thing that I see, I don't know, take for what it's worth, the thing that I see that can help these FCAT kids, because we're not Title I, right? So we're one of the 4 in South Lake County, I think, that are Title I. But we have a lot of the FCAT 1s and 2s, and I have 10 ESE kids that I'm responsible for. And the girl in the other classroom has 10. So in 4th grade, we have 20. So we both have a co-teaching situation. But the ones that are not ESE, but they're the ones in the 2s, we kind of feel like we have to take 2 kind of a thing, because we're kind of watching over them. But there's not plenty, we do well, but there's some other kids in the other classes that those are the ones that are going to fall through the cracks. And I think it's a personnel thing, like spend that $1 million on more teachers as opposed to more iPads to stick in front of them, or programs on the computer that they get bored with, or you know what I mean?
And see, that's why it's so important, because that particular initiative, the Struggling Students and the ELM, that will run through the innovation part of that process to sit down so that we're not just arbitrarily saying, well, we're going to buy this and buy this and buy this and buy this, that we need to be very methodical and have a methodology to say, okay, what's the criteria we're going to use before you spend this money, and have a very well thought out plan.
Yeah.
And how we're going to measure the effectiveness of it.
Because I can get a kid up to reading level if I can spend one-on-one time with him, as opposed to him sitting in front of a computer. You know what I mean?
Right.
So is that $1 million, is that a possibility for teacher salaries, or is that just?
No,
It could be,
it's open
okay,
for
so
discussion.
it might be. Okay. And I was also wondering about the principal thing. Now, I know Ms. Cockcroft really well, and she, I think, is the best principal there is. Now, but she can't do her job and somebody else's job. None of us can. And that whole teacher, that goes into my other question too about the coaches. Would that mean that like our elementary school would get another coach? I mean, ideally,
right. What we're talking about right now, the way we have instruction, we've started this venture, is we have 5 instructional coaches in our district, and they're assigned a ratio of brand new teachers in our district. And so we know that you need to have a ratio of 1 to however many teachers, 15, 20, 25, 30, whatever it may be, to do that. So it may be that when you start, you have to ramp it up. So it may be that cadre of 5 instructional coaches may become 8 or become 10 because you're serving these brand new teachers in our district.
So they would get a couple schools, so they would
Right.
kind of travel around.
Right.
And the principal thing, like I said, she couldn't do her job and somebody else's job.
Right.
Would that be a county thing too, and she could go around?
That is being designed. What we've tried to do, because we've tried to do it, because we know it's very important.
Yeah.
That each first-year principal is assigned a mentor, but it is
It's so
like,
crazy.
if
Yeah.
they're in another building and very rarely, they catch their time as they can.
Yeah.
We're talking about having a more formalized process.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I think that's all.
Oh, those were great questions. All right, anything else?
Oh, the differentiating thing. I think that, going back to the FCAT 1s and 2s, that's where I see, doing it every day, seeing those kids are just, I always tell them, if you can't read, you can't do anything. You have to be able to read. I always say, if my Powerball numbers come up next week, I'm building a building right next to Pine Ridge Elementary. Everybody who can't read is coming to see me until they can read, and, bringing in whoever I need to bring in, because that's it. That's it.
Right, and we found that to be such a critical area.
Yeah, and then you're going to lose them, if they don't do it by middle school, especially the ESC kids, and no knocks on the middle school ESC teachers because they're running here, there, and everywhere. But in elementary school, where we have such sort of a tight-knit thing with the kids, because we're in the classrooms with them, as opposed to the ESC teachers who move around in middle school, if we don't get them before they leave 5th grade, they're...
Yeah, you gotta catch them early.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. And just my little thing, I was at a meeting with Mr. Mathias at the SAC meeting for our guidance counselors.
Right.
We love our guidance counselors at South Lake High. And we have 3 of them, and we have 1,500 students. And they're working, they call me in the summertime. I called them in the summertime. They were there working every day.
Our guidance counselors are wonderful, as all our teachers are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very caring.
So I don't know how other people get along with less, like you said, that we...
That's why we really felt like
I'm
we
very
need to take a
confused by
look
that.
at it. And I think we need to look at the tasks that we ask our guidance counselors to do.
Because I think maybe they're doing more than they should because other things being pushed on them because they don't have enough, you know what I mean? They don't have enough teachers.
They probably are doing a variety of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all this testing and I could go on and on, but I won't.
I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Well, I go to the SAC, the South Lake High SAC, and then I'm chair at Pine Ridge.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So I want us to come back and be able to say something to them, but I didn't mean to keep you.
Yeah. Hey, I was here.
She's packed up, ready to go. Let's go.
All right. Mr. Patton, did you get what you needed?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Are we all good?
We're great. We're great. I'm excited you were here.
Thank you very much.
And you did not